With Calamity being Terraria's most popular mod of all time, this video will serve as a reference for every single add-on made for Calamity, including new bosses, new difficulties, class expansions. I know I've covered a small portion of these add-ons, but trust me, there is so much more, so you'll definitely want to check some of these out. Beginning with every class expansion, the first mod is the unofficial Bard and Healer classes, an expansion to the existing Thorium mod. The Bard is a music-based class, utilizing stat empowerments, a mechanic unique to the Bard that not only buffs yourself, but nearby teammates, making it perfect for multiplayer. I won't cover every intricacy of this class, so feel free to read up on the Thorium wiki. This add-on in particular adds a bunch of Calamity Bard themed items, a majority of them which can be obtained through killing bosses, or crafted using the relevant Calamity themed ingredients. Notable weapons I wanted to showcase include an entirely new Ark of the Cosmos line, made specifically for the Bard. You know for Melee how we have the Ark of the Ancients, Ark of the Elements, and Ark of the Cosmos? Well, Bards get their own progressive line, starting with the Song of the Ancients. This particular weapon fires elemental helixes, which will split after a certain distance. It's also classified as a big wind instrument, and therefore we will need to alternate between left and right clicks in order to increase the power of this weapon. In theory, it is a really cool weapon and has a unique mechanic, however can be really challenging in practice, having to dodge projectiles whilst keeping track of the timer for optimal usage. Moving on to the Song of the Elements, this post Moonlord upgrade now fires 3 elemental beams that can hit the same target multiple times. And onto the final upgrade, utilizing Auric Tesla, we have the Song of the Cosmos. Not only does it now fire 5 elemental helixes, it provides you with an absurd amount of stat empowerments. So even if it's not the most optimal for DPS, having this as a side weapon to provide buffs will definitely be helpful for your teammates. I will also add there is even an exo weapon for the Bard named the Symphonic Fabrications, and well, have a listen and tell me if this sounds familiar. So an amazing set of weapons for Bard, but we cannot forget about the Healer class. And contrary to its name, yes, it does provide a supportive role for other players, but also an extremely strong DPS class. I'll assume you've played Thorium before, but once again, I'll link you with the wiki to read up on the mechanics of the Healer class. This add-on in particular adds a new sub-weapon for healers, the Heavy Sights. A slower overall attack rate, however guarantees soul essence on direct hits. From the humble beginnings of the Wolfram Scythe to the Disaster, heaps of Heavy Sights for every single part of Calamity progression. And just to show you the vast array of options, let's take a look at the Exo side. This is the healer's version of the Exo Blade, requiring you to obtain the Terrarium Scythe from Thorium, as well as the Milky Way from the Devoured Gods, the Beak from Yharon, the Death Adder from the Poltergeist, Hydrogen Sulfide from Hydrothermic Bars, and the Tidal Wade from Leviathan, all combined together for one of the strongest weapons in this mod. And for the last features I wanted to cover, we also even have exhumed versions of weapons. I'm not going to even try to pronounce this name, but for Bard, it creates this iconic quote-unquote Calamity Bells, or the Oath of Sacrifice for healers. There is a whole lot more content other than weapons that I can't showcase, or else this video will be way too long than it already is, including Calamity armor sets for Bard Healer, elemental accessories for Bard Healer, as well as even some cool compatibility with the Catalyst mod, which I'll cover in a later section. Basically, every aspect of Calamity progression is included in this mod. The Bombus Apis Mod adds various bee-related weapons and accessories, streamlined and integrated within Calamity, including its own Beekeeper class that utilizes honey. For the sake of time, I'll showcase one of each weapon type from each point of progression. This can include weapons such as the Crabby Comb in pre-hard mode, or the Frigid Frost Comb in pre-hard mode, guns or ranged weapons which have more unique projectiles. These can include stuff like the Honey Rifle in pre-hard mode, or the Bee Explosion in hard mode. You also got melee type weapons like swords and yo-yos. However, there isn't any Calamity themed options for these weapons. Either way, expect examples like the Bee Blade or the Wasp Nest for yo-yo players. And other weapon types like summons or spellbooks. These are my absolutely favourite for how silly they can be, like the Queen's Larvae, which summons your own miniature Queen Bee. And I will say it's quite busted for post Moonlord. These all use the Himnatra damage type and consume honey on use, a new type of resource which acts very similar to mana. Like the rest of the class compatibilities, expect class specific helmets for each of the Calamity themed armor sets like Statagel, all the way to Auric Tesla. However, you can choose to experiment with your own custom sets, like the Bee Sniper armor, which has a chance to mark enemies, allowing you to do additional damage. Remember that whilst as of this video, it hasn't been updated to 1.4.4, I thought it still might be useful to keep an eye out on. You can expect an update video when the developer decides to rework the add-on. Next class is the Boulder class Calamity expansion. From the original mod, you acquire Boulder launchers that will allow you to fire the weapon to deal rolling damage, a type unique to Boulder weapons. But important note, these will self-inflict damage onto the player, but there will be accessories and items that can reduce or negate this effect. So with that being said, let's go through all the Calamity Boulder types. The Wolfen Boulder is your first one. It's simple and does nothing special that I can see. The Desert Rolling Cactus, which fires Leviathan teeth that do not pierce. The Boulder Room, which inflicts various debuffs like Confused, Poisoned, and On Fire onto enemies. The Slime Core Boulder, which has a chance to explode slime in a larger radius. The Ice Boulder, that can fire homing rapid icicles and looks very broken in my opinion. The Brimstone Boulder, which does nothing special that I can see. The Aquatic Rolling Cactus, a stronger version of the Desert Rolling Cactus that fires gravity affected boulders that release Leviathan teeth to nearby enemies. And as for the Leviathan Boulder, it's just comically large. And then lastly, we have the Plague Beehive, which has a chance to explode and hatch a mini Plague Bringer to fire projectiles. Remember, this in conjunction with the original mod as well, there are so many variations and builds you can try. As for the Clicker class, it's pretty self-explanatory. These type of weapon sprites resemble a cursor and do a new type of damage called click damage. So let's take a look at the class mechanics, beginning with the Wolfen Clicker weapon. This deals 4 damage per click, and as you can see, has a pretty small click radius, so any clicks outside this ring won't do any damage. A pretty basic first weapon, but as you progress through the game, you'll be introduced to even stronger clickers, with more unique effects to play around with. Going in progression order, the pre-hard mode clickers include the Wolfen Clicker, Scourge, Sea Remains, Mushy, Rotten, Fleshy, Arrow, and Glue clickers. Hard mode clickers include the Earthen, Gauze, Cryo, Daedalus, Frosty, Brimstone, Aquatic, Calamity, Feral, Plague, Scoria, Terror, Blood God, Aureus, Anahita, Cosmic Star, and Meld clickers. And post-mineral clickers, we have the Elemental Clicker, Profaned, Red Lightning, Bloodstone, Bloom, Ruinous, and Polterplasm clickers. Keep in mind this mod is still in development, with more content to come, but definitely can still be played through its entirety. Like other class expansions to Calamity, accessories and armor can also be applied to the Clicker class, in order to boost stats like damage, click radius, or even have certain clicker effects. The next class we'll look at is Dragonball Terraria. This revolves around Ki, a resource that will be integral for weapons and transformations. Whilst they do drop from any enemy, the simplest way is using the energy charge hotkey to replenish it. Next is the transformation tree, where you need to gain mastery in order to unlock stronger and stronger transformations. These work as unique buffs to the player at the cost of a constant ki drain, and can be activated and disabled with the corresponding hotkeys. Mine are all just set to default. That's the rough TLDR of the original mod, so let's look at what the Calamity expansion adds to the Dragonball Terraria. Transformations include the Ultra Instinct line. Ultra Instinct Omen is first unlocked at post-Aquatic Scourge, and is technically counted as a technique, not a transformation. Tapping the hotkey will buff your movement speed and give you a chance to dodge attacks. The numbers and chance percentages will scale depending on progression, with the Ultra Instinct Saiyan form at post-Dragon Folly, and the Ultra Ego Saiyan form unlocked after defeating any Rune of Cost boss. As with Calamity progression, this also adds in weapons to fill in the gap of post-Moonlord content, adding weapon tiers from 7 to 11. Some examples can include the Fire Breath and Super Ultra Spirit Bomb from tier 7, Divine Retribution and God Slicer from tier 8, the Cataclysmic Orb, Sorrow Scythe and Neo Spirit Ball from tier 9, the Mastered Beam and Endless Destruction from tier 10, and then the Supreme Kamehameha and Angelic Star from tier 11. Just to name a few of the many key weapons. And if you want even more add-ons for Dragon Ball, feel free to check out the Super Saiyan Blue evolutions and Gohan forms, all of which will be linked down below. As for the Calamity Flamethrowers add-on, this has basically been made redundant with the new update to the catalyst, adding both reworked flamethrowers and Calamity Whips. To avoid repeating myself, feel free to watch the entire old versus new showcase, linked over here. And as for the rest of the Catalyst mod, let's move on to the bosses section. Now the Catalyst mod needs no introduction, adding an insane super boss, Astralgeldon. This was the removed boss from base Calamity mod around 6 years ago in 2018, with Asham Aureus taking its place. However, apart from a similar appearance, the fight itself are no way alike. Within this add-on, Astralgeldon can be challenged anytime pre-Moonlord using an Astral Communicator. But it's important to mention if you've already defeated the Moonlord, he won't be able to be summoned, mainly due to its juicy rewards for overcoming such a tough challenge. As for its behaviour, in its first phase, it follows basic slime AI, jumping around and slamming the ground, where you can rupture these blinded obelisks. It can also sort of fly, casting star attacks, rotating asteroid belts, and spawn nova slimes. Me personally, it's a pretty simple and straightforward phase, but as for its phase 2, this is where some of the insanity begins. The attack breakdown consists of initial attacks, where it will fling blinded stone rocks at the player, jumping off screen, and summoning nova slimes. A slam and star attack, which will cause the boss to jump down on the player several times, releasing stars outwards. A nebula dash, which Astralgeldon will leave the arena and charge the player with telegraph beams. Or its death ray starburst attack, releasing 8 yellow lasers that curve into a star pattern. There is honestly so much variation in its attacks, which makes the boss fight one of the best in Calamity, not to mention the music and resprited visuals to the entire fight makes it so epic. Of course, there is a final desperation phase that I'll leave you to experience for yourself. But now let's talk about the aftermath. Metanova ore will generate in the underground astral infection, providing much stronger equipment than what you would normally have access to. Going through Astralgeldon's drops, first we have the Influx Cluster, which allows you to transform into a nebula and dash towards your cursor position. The Astral Lash is your grappling hook that teleports the player, very similar to the Hook of Dissonance. And the Scythe of the Abandoned God, this is a flawless drop, which means can only be obtained from no hitting Astralgeldon. You can assume for a difficult challenge, this weapon is probably one of the most broken, and can be viable all the way up to the Devour of Gods. The treasure bag will also drop Astral Jelly, which is an essential ingredient to craft some additional Metanova equipment. But moving beyond the Astralgeldon themed catalyst stuff, this add-on also expands 2 niche subclasses, being Summoner Whips and Ranger's Flamethrowers. I've made separate videos showcasing every single one of these reworks, so feel free to watch that video if you're interested. The Calamity add-on adds even more fandom wiki content, with a focus on bosses. Pyrogen was created as a fiery and polar opposite of Cryogen, required to be fought in the desert biome. It features various different styles of brimstone blasts that explode outwards, and a flaming dash attack, leaving behind trails of brimstone. With fandom content, it's not necessarily the most spectacular fight, but very funny. Defeating it will drop a custom treasure bag, and let's take a look at some of the stuff you can expect to find. The Seared Shredder is your melee weapon that throws out lingering scythes towards your mouse cursor, and the Obsidian is ranged. It fires muskets that explode into small pieces of shrapnel. The next boss we'll take a look at is Supreme Calamitas. Yes, Calamitas, a flaming clam, fought in the Brimstone Crags biome. It takes the projectiles of Supreme Calamitas and shoots them in various patterns, and even does the teleporting nonsense like a regular giant clam. It's very bullet hell-like. And finally, we got the Wall of Bronze, a post-Moonlord boss intended to be challenged with Auric tier equipment. It functions very similar to the Wall of Flesh, where it will force the player to move horizontally from one side of your world to the other. Its attacks consist of a Bronze Claw, which will lunge at the player, a Bronze Laser, which will charge up before firing a massive sweeping death ray. It has a Bronze Torrent that will periodically fire plasma lasers, as well as summon mechanical leeches and maws to chase the player. Basically the mechanized version of the Wall of Flesh, but I gotta say, the sprite work is legendary. Unlike other main bosses within the Calamity add-ons, the aftermath for defeating the Wall of Bronze will generate a new frozen hell biome, featuring new mobs to fight, and the main material acquired from this biome is needed to craft new frozen equipment, which I'll leave you to check out for yourself. But going beyond just boss content, this mod features extra new weapons, as well as old ones like short swords. I'm also a bit biased here, but we will also have the coveted RGB Murasama in this mod, which makes it an instant 10 out of 10 I highly recommend. As for Calamity Entropy, this is a relatively new mod, with minor updates as of recording this video. It primarily adds void and dark themed weapons, but of course the main content is the brand new cruiser boss. According to boss checklist, it's a post-Devour of Gods boss, however can be crafted immediately after defeating the Ceaseless Void. In my testing, I found the fight way too easy with post-Devour of Gods gear, but even under-geared, fighting it immediately with post-Moonlord solo equipment, the boss still felt way too weak, and the rewards you gain from the boss just completely break progression. But with those critiques aside, let's break the Void Bottle and unleash this worm. The initial attack consists of flying around, dashing at the player, whilst its tail can release cosmic stars that gradually linger around. It's important to note that an arena border also tracks the boss, so you can't really run away and snipe it from afar. Its next move reminds me of old Infernum Dog, where it will swiftly rotate around the player while shooting stars at you. Other moves include Void Spikes or this Telegraph Dash attack. Being caught in its jaw will cause the cruiser to drag you into the void. As I mentioned prior, I'm not sure if it's a bug or anything, but the boss damage numbers feel weak for how powerful they look in game. So here's a little snippet of the fight. In later phases, it gets very crazy with being able to fire lasers, and I'm pretty sure when it's fully finished, it will be amazing to play with. Some of the boss shops from the cruiser include the Void Relic, which despite its sprite, is a summoner weapon which spawns a void mark to follow your mouse cursor. It consumes all minion slots, with the more slots consumed, the higher the damage. Silence is your rogue weapon that fires Godslayer shurikens with chains that lock onto the closest enemy. Symbol of Theocracy is my personal favourite mage weapon, in which holding left click spawns a circle of divine cannons. Releasing the mouse will simultaneously emit a void laser to annihilate everything in front of it. Melee players have two new drops. The Rune Song is a very large broadsword that fires homing runes, whilst the Void Annihilate throws a lingering chakram that deals contact damage. Simply leaving it there will cause it to fire void bolts at the nearest enemy, but right clicking the weapon will allow you to teleport towards it. You can have multiple of these out at a time, and you can choose which one to go to by hovering your mouse cursor over it. And lastly, we have the Wings of Hush, which will be your ranger weapon. This bow fires one central Void Seeker, which can pierce targets, with 2 additional homing arrows for a total of 3 projectiles per attack. Of course, you'll notice all these weapons apply the Void debuff, adding some extra DPS. So that was just some of the content. But remember, this is one of the many add-ons that are constantly being updated, so I highly recommend you check it out and see what's new. Moving on to the second gelatinous boss for this video, we have the Hunt of the Old God mod. This introduces Goozma, a scrap Calamity boss concept intended to be the god of all slimes. The spawning ritual is very unique, requiring you to throw an overloaded sludge onto King or Queen Slime during a slime rain in hard mode. As for the fight itself, Goozma has 2 main phases. Phase 1, it cycles between 4 powerful slimes: Corruption, Crimson, Divine, and Stellar, each with its own attacks, so we'll have to learn them all in order to properly deal with Goozma. The Corruption Slime fires streams of slime and can jump, releasing toxic sludge. It also splits into smaller slimes that orbit the player and will slam inward, and create stone pillars and spikes, whilst launching the player upwards. The Divine Slime summons harmless stars that later expand and deal damage. It can hover around while shooting slime shots and crystal shards, and forms a shield with a pixie ball that the player needs to hit in order to avoid a deadly explosion. The Crimson Slime predictably slams onto the player, creating shockwaves and clones that also slam down. It can also just hover and summon clones of itself that slam downwards as well. And its last attack that jumps left and right, whilst Goozma fires slime bombs and sparks. And the Stellar Slime, which can split into stars that form constellations, whilst Goozma chases the player. It also has this move which transforms into a black hole, pulling in meteors whilst firing slime shots and bombs. So yeah, a lot to deal with and remembering what each slime does. But in my opinion, this is the most difficult part of the fight, and its second phase is primarily focused on Goozma itself. To summarize and not spoil the entire fight, Goozma switches to shooting projectiles, dashing at the player, and firing a huge laser while stationary. For defeating Goozma, it will crack apart and pop out loot. You'll be rewarded with at least one of the following weapons, and if you want a more detailed breakdown on this add-on, I also have that full video right here. So those were just some of the extremely well made add-ons. But these next couple Calamity bosses, I would say they're quite meme worthy. Not to say that they're bad, just more light-hearted and fun. Hypnos in Calamity arguably started all this Calamitas nonsense, resembling an exo version of the Brain of Cthulhu, and in order to summon it, you will require a bloody vein to be put into the code breaker. And as for the overview of this fight, for phase 1, Hypnos stays below the player whilst its neurons perform the following attacks. It has a laser spread, which neurons will form a fan above Hypnos and shoot blue exo pulse lasers outwards. Its laser wall attack, which neurons will form a wall and fire lasers upwards as Hypnos moves rapidly between left and right. Spinning charges, which the neurons will circle Hypnos whilst it charges at the player. And the neuron charge, which will extend and electrify. As for its phase 2, after all the neurons are unplugged, Hypnos' force field drops, starting phase 2. Electric Grid causes neurons to stick to random spots on the screen, whilst Hypnos charges at the player. Hypnos can also circle the player, increasing speed while the neurons spin in rings, firing red exo pulse lasers inwards. It also has other predictive dashes and its vertical wall attack. So a very brief summary of the fight, and for defeating it, you'll be rewarded with a pretty nice trophy and a custom Hypnos mask. This add-on doesn't include any unique drops, but hey, what can you do? As for Maid Supreme Calamitas, this thematic of Calamitas is arguably one of the most iconic for some strange reason. This add-on changes the sprite of Supreme Calamitas by making her wear a maid outfit, but the sprite is not the only thing that's changed, as you have her brothers, and even some of the projectiles changed as well. Moving on to the Sloome mod, whilst adds extra Calamity legacy content, the main focus on this add-on has to be the Exo Slime super boss, that's intended to be fought with endgame gear. Phase 1 Exodygen starts by teleporting rapidly in multiple directions, unleashing a large spread of fast-moving Exoblade beams. And the final attack I could see is that it teleports above the player, firing scattered spreads of Exolight in random directions. It will cycle between these different moves until we get to phase 2 at 75% HP, in which 2 cross symbols appear on the player, marking the directions where these turrets will start firing, while above the player, Exodygen also creates 3 additional beams. It dashes through these beams, triggering bursts of Exolight with each dash. And to finish, the slime will teleport above the player again and fire slow-moving Gauze nukes, alongside even faster projectiles. If you manage to survive all that, at 50% HP, we begin phase 3, in which you will now summon the Omega Cider, which must be defeated to continue. This extra mini-boss alternates between positions of Exodygen, each teleporting to opposite sides of the arena, and firing massive Exoblade beams. Together, they'll dash in a cross pattern at the player, with each dash releasing bursts of Exolight. Defeating the Omega Cider will begin phase 4, in which Exodygen starts this phase with shockwaves and a bright flash, getting a spinning aura in the center. During the phase, the slime can also turn into a singularity, sucking in Exolights, which grows the singularity even bigger and brighter before releasing a massive explosion. And at 25% HP, we begin phase 5, in which the boss will teleport far below the player and spawn in a massive star that fires 5 spreads of light in all directions, with additional smaller lights targeting the player. Exodygen will then trap itself and the player in a bubble, and this is basically the last desperation attack before the boss is finally defeated. As for Exodygen's drops, the Neuron style changes between different attack modes, with each attack mode decimating anything in its path. The Gem of Exodygen grants 50 health and mana on every use, without potion sickness, and the Exo Gel, which is basically a stat stick accessory. You can also expect some legacy content like the Stratosphere. However, there is a specific Demutation add-on, which focuses on all the removed content of Calamity, so we'll be covering that in a later section. And now, out of all the Calamity boss add-ons, the Yharim Worm has to be the most unserious out of the bunch, filled to the brim with memes, very loud sounds, and a lot of posting. The main feature has to be the Yharim Worm itself, and well, it's your typical worm boss AI. It has a lot of HP, so if for whatever reason you're doing this legitimately, bringing your high piercing shred weapons are necessary. The only main attacks it has is a quick dash attack and sprouting out these tyrant swords. There's no standout attacks, but honestly, it's just really funny and amusing to look at. And its death sound is absolutely legendary. And the item drops are just even funnier. With that being said, that's not the only things this mod has to offer. We have some other interesting bosses, including the Sun Pounder, a fiery version of the Eye of Cthulhu, the Angry Worm, a super low res version of the Yharim Worm boss, the Funky Worm, which jumps around slowly firing boulders, and I'll showcase one last one, the 22 Hornet. As you can see, not a really serious mod, but the memes are great. So since this video is mostly in alphabetical order, we're leaving the meme add-ons back into my opinion, the best boss add-on for Calamity. It's the Wrath of the Gods, that adds 2 unique bosses, the Avatar of Emptiness, aka old concept Calamity Noxus, and the Nameless Deity, inspired from old Xerox lore. And a quick PSA, Noxus will be completely reworked with some of the following background footage via their Discord. It features completely new attacks, playing off the theme of darkness. This includes a cool portal entrance to the Void Arena, extremely deadly Void Spikes, and other cool features. I highly recommend you visit their Discord for all the upcoming news. And as for the current version of Noxus, I have a full fight if you want to see what it looks like currently. Similar to Noxus, the Nameless Deity will also be receiving some reworks as well, though I don't have enough information to make comments about it. The current essence of the fight will remain the same, so let's go through its attacks, but firstly we have to spawn it. It will require the player to stand under the apple tree, in which a cutscene will play, marking the start of the fight. In phase 1, Nameless will cycle between multiple different attacks. Starburst fires a ring of orange fireballs and homing blue bolts. Cosmic Burst charges across the screen, leaving portals that fire energy rays. And then Collapsing Star summons a sun that follows the player, spinning solar flares and fireballs also accompany it before compressing into a black hole. As for phase 2, at 65% health, the background changes to a kaleidoscope effect, disabling rage and adrenaline. Judgment Cut randomly creates harmless beams that appear, followed by slashes alongside them. Fractal Punch creates two fists that punch together, exploding into slashes that create light daggers. And then we have this move, which creates solar sparks. Other moves include Deity, spreading Orion's sword, and dash at the player, leaving behind dimensional ribs. In the final phase, at around 25% health, the background becomes a colourful kaleidoscope. Light slashes cause the screen to go dark and cracks appear around the player, followed a barrage of slashes. Kronos' hand creates a golden clock that traps the player and shoots spirals of light orbs, which then reverses in direction. Nebula Gigabeam fires a massive laser that tracks the player, darkening the screen and muffling the sounds. And then Moment of Creation summons a giant explosion, followed by galaxies raining down from the player. Just a completely insane boss fight, and most likely the greatest modded Terraria boss fight. As for its drops, we mainly have decorative items such as the black hole, monoliths, and so on. Other Easter eggs include unique interactions between Nameless and Noxus. If you spawn Noxus during the Nameless fight, they will begin fighting each other. However, the player can still be damaged if caught in any of its attacks. We also have the Noxus spray, which if you use it against the Noxus boss, it will do this. And also, we have special Get Fixed Boyd interactions, such as Nameless being a true American and pulling out a Glock. A lot of cool things to check out in this add-on, and that's the end of the bosses section. However, quite a few other add-ons within the For Fun section does contain bosses, but they're quite memey and unserious. I wouldn't really recommend adding them for big playthroughs, as that's not their intent. So with that out of the way, let's now cover the Apotheosis and Friends mod. This was a really old add-on in TMod Loader 1.3, but has recently been ported to the latest version. It contains various fun endgame items that are extremely unbalanced. The most iconic is the expansion of the Apotheosis weapon line, with the base form casting super fast mech worms to chase enemies, and right-clicking with the spell tome will spawn a magical projection of Dog's head that can fire additional laser beams. The next upgrade will be the Apotheosis EX, which functions similar to the first, as it can spawn in Devourers that chases enemies. The only major difference is how absurd the damage numbers are, with the next on the list being the rare Apotheosis, which is the previous weapons combined, but just on crack. And the final upgrade is the Apotheosis EX 2.0 Soul. It does this. Yeah, so pretty broken for endgame content, but this obviously must mean that there are some bosses to fight. The Lord was once a removed boss in base Calamity, but has now returned, so there's not really much use for it in this mod now. It summons a joke version of Yharim, which will rotate between every single boss AI in the game, and contact with his boss will result in all your equipment being stripped away from you. Defeating this boss will drop the suspicious looking No You pet, which is a miniature version of the Lord. And the next boss is the Ascended Chibi Devourer, a mega version of the Cosmic Plushie pet, along with the Yharim Worm Sepulture. Like other content in this add-on, it is a complete clusterfuck. I seriously do not understand what's going on, and even if you manage to drop her below 70% health, she can regain it all back and begin phase 2, spawning a ring of chibis that lock you into battle. As for the loot she drops, the previously mentioned Apotheosis stuff, but one of its drops you'll need is the summon item for the next boss. Behold, Calamity God. A merge of boss sprites all into one that resembles Yharim. It teleports around your screen, filling it with random projectiles. Is it even beatable? Well, you tell me. And the last boss is the Verbolten one. Just let me show you. As for Calamity Chaos, this is a smaller mod which adds a few late game weapons, accessories and potions. For weapons, you have the Spirit Alpha, which is an exo yo-yo that throws a cosmic spirit ball that tracks your mouse cursor. It can shoot homing elemental stars whilst hovering, and on contact, applies elemental mix. The Star Breath is a 3-string melee broadsword which creates these little stars that revolve around you that progressively get stronger. And the last exo weapon we have is the Source of the Ether, a magic based gun that fires gradually ramping exo bullets. There are a lot of cool accessories, so why not showcase some of my favourite and most unique from this mod so far. The eye patch is a silly one, where any single attack has a 1% chance of dealing 1000% extra bonus damage. Or what about the vape, which displays hitboxes for players, items, projectiles, and NPCs. You can imagine for bullet hell bosses, this makes dodging quite easy. So yeah, a small and unfinished mod, which I hope gets some more content in the future. And now for the Calamity Mod Classic series, which includes the very first version of Calamity, playable on 1.4.4. Notable additions include the very first iteration of Desert Scourge, very first Slime God, and the very first Devour of Gods fight. You can also expect a decent amount of items, including the Galacticus Blade. There's also a lot of references which are completely different from today, such as Xerox equipment, the use of Dragon bars, and other Yharim equipment, which obviously now have been changed. I have a full playthrough of the mod, so if you're interested in how Calamity was like almost 8 years ago, check it out over here. And as for other versions, remember this also encompasses all the previous versions that came before it. But for the sake of time, we'll just include notable additions from that specific patch. So for version 1.1, this includes the introduction of the first Calamitas, along with her brothers Cataclysm and Catastrophe. There were also restarted Desert Scourge and Devour of Gods in the newer version. They've also added weapons in this patch, including Adamantite Throwing Axes, Calamitas' Inferno, Cobalt Kunais, the Death Wind, Mithril Knives, Orichalcum Spike Gemstones, Palladium Javelins, and the Titanium Shuriken. A lot of these weapons we know today for the Rogue class. And in version 1.2, this is the last of the classic series, and brings a brand new Poltergeist boss fight, a brand new Revengeance mode difficulty with the mechanic known as Stress. This also brought a rework to the Siren and Leviathan boss. And of course, this includes a plethora of previous patches, including the now removed Astralgeldon boss fight and Bumble Birb. In this version, there were a decent amount of Calamity bosses, and I find it amazing how Yharim has kept the same sprite after all these years. So what about Community Remix? All of this mod's content comes from the community. Since I've covered this mod in previous videos, this will only feature content in the newest update. This includes the perfectly balanced Volbolton one, which combines every single Calamity accessory into one. But the best change is the inclusion of Fanny the Flame, a super helpful NPC that will follow you along your journey, providing you with tips, stories, and a whole bunch of nonsense. Please remember, this mod is a joke. I do not recommend including this in any mega modded packs. But anyways, here's all the new content. We have the new Plague Jungle biome, the old school weapon, a lot of mini bosses including Calamitas again, Cyber Dradon, La Ruga, and a whole lot more examples. As for actual bosses, we have the Wolfram Excavator and the Polyphamerus. Along with his joke bosses, you can expect some joke weapons. And here's just a few, which in my opinion are the most stupid. The Demutation Mod adds a bunch of removed content back into Calamity for the nostalgic players. The most impactful in my opinion were the old difficulty modes. Iron Heart was an extra difficulty where healing potions or any positive life regen was disabled, and enemy damage would scale off your max health, leading to some insanely challenging runs. Defiled Rune disables your winged flight and allows all enemies to critically hit you. This in turn increases most rare item drop chances from mobs, allowing for easier farming of items. And the last removed difficulty was Armageddon, which makes any hit while a boss is active instantly one-shot you. If you manage to successfully no-hit a boss, you will receive 6 treasure bags. Malice mode was another removed difficulty, however was not included in Demutation. So apart from these super old challenge modes for Calamity, the mod also adds in a plethora of old and original versions of reworked weapons. The super nostalgic ones have to be the Ark of the Cosmos line. They were a stable and reliable weapon for melee players, however just felt like a ranged melee weapon. Of course I prefer the current version as it feels more like a melee weapon, allowing you to parry hits and play more close combat. Other sets of weapons that are removed were the short swords. If you remember the Rust and Dust patch, this removed basically every short sword in the game. This add-on brings them back in its original state. So technically another subclass you can play, but I wouldn't recommend it. So what about some other iconic weapons that were removed? One that instantly comes to mind as well is the Stratosphere, a mage upgrade to the Nebula Arcanum. Or what about those classless weapons that use Magnum rounds? There's a lot of other content here as well, such as old Calamity potions like Yharim Stimulants, and if you combine this with the Calamity Classic series, I'm sure you'll get a hit of nostalgia just playing through the mod and see how far we've come. Wait, did someone say brace yourself for the Daawnlight Spirigen Origin expansion? It visually changes the DSO accessory to have more costumes. This includes the Zero suit from Meteoroid, Quiet's outfit from Metal Gear Solid 5, Katarina's dress from My Next Life as a Villainess, a bunny costume, a reverse bunny suit costume, and the Summer Vinci's outfit from Fate Grand Order. Yeah, a lot of these are quite explicit, so you'll have to check it out for yourself. Next, we have Calamity's Vanities, a large mod, and probably one of the largest in the entire list, which like the name suggests, adds various pets, mounts, and other decorative items based off the Calamity mod. Obviously, I cannot show you everything this mod has to offer, as there's just a plethora of stuff, a lot of which you'll come across in normal play. These include extra Calamity characters, and reintroducing ancient armor sets, giving you the nostalgia of old Calamity sprites. What I do want to focus on is content you may not come across naturally in playthroughs, and that's Easter eggs. During the month of April, oh my god, why is Fanny back? Why? The Calamity Vanity mod will enter the April Fool's Day event, where the modifiers of some items will be changed like the sponge. And then a brand new NPC, Yharim, where he'll show you the Among Us pet. If you use this pet and also have a stone pile on your head, he will trigger the Sus event, where the Among Us will slowly grow in size, and then cause your screen to rain all sorts of different projectiles from the sky. Other than that, there is also the summon option, unlocking a new boss fight called the Fogbound. I remember old versions of this boss, it was sort of like a cracked version of the Dungeon Guardian. However, in this current version I'm playing on, it's more like the Brain of Cthulhu, in which it's able to spawn clones of itself to dash at the player. Other moves include a Moonlord Laser, and that's about it. So let's move on to the last Easter egg, and that's spraying the Yharim NPC with the Death Sun's Wind, turning him into the Meldosaurus. It's funny because your Among Us pet can also fight alongside you, making for a fun April Fool's experience. And sticking to the theme of vanities, the Waifu Packs is a pretty simple one. It replaces sprites for a bunch of bosses, including the Bumble Birb, Devour of Gods, Calamitas, Ceaseless Void, Crabulon, Cryogen, Hivemind, Leviathan, the Perforators, Plaguebringer Goliath, the Poltergeist, Profane Guardians, Providence, Slime God, Supreme Calamitas, and Yharim. Which one's your favourite? Comment it down below. And quick firing through more add-ons, we have the Real Yharon mod, which adds in a Minecraft chicken that replaces a pretty much decade-old sprite. So I'm going to combine these next two add-ons together because they basically do the same thing. The Muru-sama and Calamity Attached adds a buffed version of the Muru-sama, with the Muru-sama having a higher base damage and has the ability to fire projectiles. That's it, that's the add-on. And for Calamity Attached, it restores the Muru-sama to its quote-unquote original size pre-harvest update, whilst also adding extra abilities, like every third swing will release skulls that home onto nearby enemies, or attacks which have a chance to spawn a lightning bolt from the sky. Quite minor add-ons, but cool if you want to play around with different iterations of the Muru-sama. Expanding beyond for fun content add-ons, we also have Calamity themed town NPCs and pets to cover. These will mostly be small in size, and most are based off the fandom wiki. Calamitas Brainrot adds several Skibidi Gyat themed content, and also makes some changes to Calamitas clone. The Exo Toilet will move in immediately post Moonlord and sell various Brainrot themed weapons. The Sigma Stall contains Prime Hydration, which slowly poisons the player, as well as 4 weapons which I'll quickly showcase now, like the Bateman's Gun, the Skibidi Slicer, the Rizzler's Goon, and the beginning and the end. So yeah, a very interesting add-on. And next up, we have the Starborn Princess, which adds a brand new Calamity NPC based off the fandom wiki page. For her to move in, you'll need to defeat Providence. The first button is the shop, where she'll sell a few post-middle materials up to your progression point. Pretty useful if you don't want to farm, but let's check out the modded stuff. The Divine Core is pretty confusing for me, as it slowly depletes all your HP, but you can indefinitely consume it to increase your HP, meaning you basically become invulnerable. The Mars Bar, apart from its gigantic sprite, is a food item which grants the exquisitely stuffed buff for 20 minutes. Then we have the Sundial Nimbus, that rains down homing profaned energy, shredding anything in its way. There are also some other weapons that can secretly be obtained by killing the Starborn NPC, but warning though, this will cause her to transform into the Providence boss. As for the 3 secret weapons, this includes the Star Flare, an extremely OP yo-yo, the Celestial Heaven Fire, a rapid fire bow, and the Cosmic Star Fury, a mage one that rains beams from the sky. That was all the stuff that she can give, so what about the transmogrification option? This allows several items to be converted, but it's important to note that these transmutations take real time, which can't be sped up. So for example, I'll place the Shard of Entumbra in the main slot, along with having 5 Souls of Light in my inventory. This will result in me getting the Light God's Brilliance in 1 minute. And 1 minute later, there we have our Light God weapon. Quite an interesting mechanic, and if you're interested in the list, it's detailed all on the fandom wiki. Moving quickly onto another mini add-on, this one is pretty funny. It introduces a new Profaned Birb Town NPC. It honestly doesn't do anything crazy, but feeding it gummy worms grants you the Provident Blessing, improving your defense, damage, and max minions for 20 minutes. Using cheat sheets, I couldn't really find anything else about this add-on, but the developer has stated that sometime there will be updates, so keep an eye out for that. The next NPC Calamity Add-on is Slug Town Pets, which, fun fact, was designed by ex-developer IBAN Plays. Going through the list, to obtain the Albino, you have to defeat the Cthulhu. Crypt requires you to defeat Declops, Storm needing the Duke Fish Run, then we have the Devourer after defeating the Moonlord, and the final Universe Slug Pet, which will move in when you have a Zenith in your inventory. Like vanilla town pets, they simply move around, and you will be able to pet them. Very cute. Now if you're a fan of the Stormweaver boss, you're gonna love this next one, which adds a couple themed pets and equipment. This includes the main Stormweaver pet, which has some special features, include being able to give it armor. You can do this by throwing specific items at it, like a Scoria bar, which will provide hydrothermic shell to the Stormweaver, an armored shell for the Stormweaver armor, a Cosmolite bar for Godslayer armor, an Auric bar for Auric armor, an Exo Prism for Thanatos armor, and Miracle Matter for the Stormweaver pet to have Miracle Plating. The Familiar can also be fed Blasphemous Donuts, and when fed, will boost defense and life regeneration, depending on how full the Stormweaver is. Also, when the Stormweaver is wearing an armored shell, Godslayer armor, or Auric armor, it can craft you a custom armor set. Dropping 2 Stormline Mandibles will give you the Mandible Replica Helmet, 10 Silk will give you the Woven Sweater, and 1 Mechanical Worm will drop its tail. Here is a quick look at all the stats of the armor pieces, and the set bonus provides an extra 100 max stealth, and empowers dashes with lightning. Additionally, once you beat the game and obtain yourself a rock, you can feed this to your pet to give it the Weaver's Sweater, providing quite a bit of health. A very cool niche add-on that comes with 2 additional weapons, crafted with armored shells. This Tempest Staff creates a singular Stormweaver minion that scales off your max minion slots. And the Boomable throws a returning boomerang, and Stealth Strikes will cause this weapon to linger and create these lightning trails that converge back to the player. Town NPC Hypnos adds a Chibi Hypnos as a town NPC. After defeating any mechanical boss, it will randomly appear, stay a while, and depart in your town, similar to a traveling merchant. However, it does not offer a shop. Instead, it has this prey option. 1 gold is required to prove your faith to Hypnos, and there will be random rewards according to your faithful acts, such as Golden Delights or Exo Prisms post Exomex. You will get Indulgence after praying, and you can use this for special crafting. The first item crafted with Indulgence is the Chibi Inera Neurons, a Vanity pet and a Light pet. No difference has been made between the Vanity and Light pet, except the slot consumed, which means it can support 2 summoning variants at the same time. And then we also have a portable radio transmitter, which just allows you to request Hypnos to visit your town. And for the final NPC, we have the Yharim Town NPC mod. Very strong, with close to 1 million hit points. It doesn't do much or sell anything useful, just the old Yharim stimulants potions and a clown outfit. What's really funny is he adds a joke Yharim boss fight. That's basically just a resprite of the Empress of Light. I guess you could add this to the list of Empress reworks in modern Terraria. But moving on to the next section, we have specifically Calamity based difficulties. I mentioned remove difficulties within Calamity Demutations, but these ones have drastically overhauled the Calamity mod experience. So let's begin with Vanquish. The focus of this mod is to add extra gameplay mechanics to Calamity to increase difficulty and constraints when fighting bosses. Taking damage is now exceptionally punishing. First is the Proficiency Bar, an old game mechanic of Calamity which consisted of 5 attributes for each of the 5 classes. Simply put it, when you deal damage with a certain class weapon, the stats of the corresponding class would increase, and this would scale all the way up to level 15. Stress was also re-implemented and reworked in Vanquish, where it will slowly build over time and is emptied on hit. The higher your stress, the more damage you take in a single hit. So a 100% stress bar will mean you take double the damage. Important note though, using Adrenaline, aka not getting hit, will empty the stress meter. Hunger/thirst are also other mechanics, which slowly depletes over time. Eating food will replenish the bar and give you an increase or decrease stats depending on the level of the bar. It's very similar to the Get Fixed Boy hunger mechanic. And lastly, we have the blood meter, which depletes as you take damage from enemies. Using your rage bar replenishes some of the lost blood, and as you can imagine, managing all these different bars can be challenging, and definitely adds a unique experience for returning players. So what about probably the most iconic Calamity mod add-on ever? We're talking about Inferno mode. Apart from drastic boss AI reworks, I'll briefly summarize some of the other peak content you can expect to see. The Rune of Cost bosses not only have some cool boss reworks, but amazing environmental thematics, including Cygnus wandering through hell as a harmless NPC, the Stormweaver, which can be rarely found in the space biome, and then the Ceaseless Void being changed in the Forsaken Archive. Like, just how terrifying is this? Other Inferno reworks include a more difficult Abyss biome, with new layers, new sub-biomes within, and a new ecosystem in which mobs can hunt each other. Within the Abyss, loot gathering isn't obtained through chests, but uniquely through different activities. One example is using the bug net to obtain yourself the Hurrying Star. Or in the depths of the Abyss, the Terminus will now be buried inside Voidstone, and digging through the rubble, you might encounter a terrifying creature. Additionally, there are more custom arenas and spawning rituals for bosses. I know this section is for difficulties, but you can also expect some weapons and vanities to be included as well. I've made full videos if you're struggling to obtain any of these, as most of these aren't obtained through crafting recipes. As for Boss Rush mode, this completely removes every mechanic from Terraria/Calamity that is not boss fighting. You'll begin in the world by chopping wood and obtain your class pendant of choice. This gives you access to every future crafting recipe for that particular class without the need of a crafting station. Blood Moon is the first event you'll need to complete to begin Boss Rush and properly be equipped for the pre-boss stage. And after gearing up and defeating King Slime, you'll be given Crystallized Slime, unlocking crafting recipes for every equipment up to that particular point. No need to mine or gather anything, just defeat bosses, use the boss jobs to upgrade your armor and gear, and then immediately fight the next boss afterwards. I suggest using the boss checklist mod to track your progress, as well as the recipe browser, so you can see everything that you're able to craft. Remember, this is only about boss fighting, so don't mix this mod with anything else. So this next section are gameplay expansions, which I would call add-ons that overhaul certain parts of Calamity's already massive progression. They won't cover entire playthroughs, but aim to expand on certain Calamity thematics. And what best to start off is Dragon's expansion, adding new utilities and accessories for chargeable items, meaning all new items within this mod will require a Dragon charging station in order to use it. As of the current version, we have the Stun Gun, a short sword style true melee weapon, and an energy pistol, in which bullets are accompanied by an extra energy bolt. Both these weapons are crafted with pre-boss materials, and fills the gap of needing to wait until Aerolite for Dragon's equipment. Next on the list is Dragon's Drill, a simple pickaxe tool which mines blocks with 100% power. This requires Aerolite to craft. And we also have the Flask of Electricity, imbuing melee, rogue, and summoner whips with the ability to electrify enemies. But other than offense, expect some cool Dragon themed accessories as well. The solar panel passively charges energy items over time, and this crafting tree starting from Dragon's gift, simply reducing charge costs, which then can be crafted into the energy loaders. It functions similar to the mana flower, but instead of mana, automatically restores weapon charge. I really love if the development continues to expand on Dragon's arsenal further, but at least with the Sunken Sea update, we'll get to play with the first tier of arsenal equipment, so that will be exciting for sure. The The Calamity Ranger expansion mod provides extra ranger ammo types and accessories in order to provide this class with more options and choices. Most are crafted from existing Calamity ingredients, and here I have the full list of new ammo types in this add-on. I cannot show it all in one video, so let's go through some of my favorites. Beginning with the funny pre-boss Yharim arrows. They are heavily affected by gravity, making them pretty useless for long distances. Then next up is probably one of the most overpowered. The hydrothermic bullet summons a volcano under enemies for an insane amount of splash damage. Or what about a new post-Moonlord soul bullet, which has a base damage of 1, but in turn has aggressive homing and piercing capabilities. You can also expect specialized ammo to be included, such as aero rockets, in which right-clicking causes your projectiles to create floating mines, and the earth-penetrating missile, being able to travel through blocks and home onto enemies. Now, this is a ranger expansion after all, which means it also comes with a ton of extra ranger based accessories throughout progression. The coil line is your first set of accessories and begins with the Yharim coil, dropped from Yharim enemies on the surface. Combining this with wires allows you to create the modified coil, providing extra range, damage, and velocity of projectiles. From this point forwards, this modified coil can be crafted into either 4 final accessories. There are even more accessories to uncover, like the United Mushrooms line, more specialized quivers, and gun holsters. So the final part of Ranger expansion has to be the weapons, so this add-on focuses more on specialized pieces with unique functionalities. Examples can include the Sand Gun that fires a desert spiky ball which explodes into shrapnel, the Plague Nade launcher which uses grenade as its primary ammo, the Death Mark Magnum that reduces enemy protection and applies the Mark for Death debuff. And the last one I immediately noticed was the OG, OP, but sadly removed Spectre Rifle. It converts muskets into homing soul rounds and was a really strong weapon in old versions of Calamity. That was the end of the Ranger expansion add-ons, but speaking of Ranger expansions, we got more of them, this time with the focus on Calamity ammo types. There is currently 9 bullet types, including Armor Piercing, Fungal Rounds, Astral Comet Rounds, Auric Rounds, Miracle Rounds, and Shadow Spec bullets, 2 arrow types including the Plague Arrows and Clockwork Arrows, and currently 1 unique ammo type, the Yharim Dart, used alongside the Yharim Dart gun. Other specialist weapons in this add-on include the Mini Dart and the Saw Blade Launcher. Kinda feels like a prequel to the official Elemental Saw Launcher that's coming real soon. There isn't much content other than this, but when this mod is complete, you should see at least 1 new ammo type for each stages of the game. Now the pets overhaul is quite an interesting one, giving every single pet in the game a unique ability or buff. As with pets obtained in Master Mode, this will make your experience easier, but nonetheless a cool add-on for some more variety to different Calamity playthroughs. As for the base mod, you can expect things such as the Tablet Fragment from Master Mode Cultist to be an offensive pet that can cycle between 2 different attacks. Mode 1 casts Ice Mist to your cursor, spewing icicles as it travels, whilst Mode 2 fires a ball of lightning similar to the boss itself. While the Calamity add-on adds more extra pets to play around with. These are broken into multiple categories, each providing its own unique set of buffs or effects. But let's give you some examples, beginning with the Trash Can, a utility/offensive based pet in which using its special ability will throw out a trash can that deals some splash damage and applies a bleed effect. Remember, all pets that do have abilities will be indicated in the bottom right hand corner, along with the respective cooldowns. Next example is the Joyful Heart, a defensive healer pet that has the ability to heal everything in a 20 tile radius for a couple seconds. Yes, this does include bosses. And moving into some hard mode pets, let's take a look at a class specific one for Rogue. The Plague Caller allows you to apply stacks to enemies, which linger for a couple seconds. Using your ability key will detonate all stacks, inflicting enemies with the Plague and Slowness debuff. Then rapid firing through post Moonlord pets, the Cosmic Plushie will nuke and basically one-shot everything in a 20 tile radius when you die. The McNuggets has a rebirth ability. The Dragon Egg has a permanent stack feature, growing stronger and stronger every time the pet deals damage. Or what about this Calamitas pet that converts all your attacks to magic? So a lot of unique and fun pets to use, which also include light pets with its own abilities, but it's already getting absurdly long. I recommend checking out the Calamity Wiki for how to acquire all the pets. Or even better, you should definitely experience this mod for yourself. As for Rogue Stealth Strikes only, I'm sure you can guess what this one does. This mod forces you to only be able to use rogue weapons if you have enough stealth to perform a stealth strike. There are also special configs to play around with the stealth related accessories like the Coin of Deceit and its upgrades. A small add-on and a unique challenge focusing more on precise aim, especially during the early game where stealth strikes are quite weak compared to spam. Now loot swap. Have you ever fought a boss only for it to drop the wrong weapon for your class? Well, Calamity Loot Swap is a simple quality of life mod that enables players to swap between boss loot, reducing refights. These work through a new manipulator item, which always drops from a Calamity boss. You can then in turn use these manipulators to convert your current drop into any other drop from that boss. As for the Calamity Overhaul mod, it reworks many different aspects of Calamity. There is seriously so much to cover, so I'll just be summarizing the content. We have the gun overhaul, which nearly all firearms have been revamped, introducing new magazine and recoil systems to make combat more realistic in real life. Melee weapon enchantments, in which a wide range of melee weapons have been optimized with cooler and more practical attack methods. This includes directional swings. There is also dozens of new weapons and equipment, along with a new crafting tree system to spice up the gameplay, and additional weapon overhauls. Of course, my bias is the reworked Murasama, and that's the main reason why you should be playing this mod. It allows you to use the Murasama from the very start, and scales with your progression, becoming stronger as you defeat certain bosses. Along with just stat increases however, it gains new abilities and a cool limit breaker. I have a full video if you're interested in that, but now let's move on to the Unnerfs Calamity. A mod that simply removes some of the nerfs Calamity does in the vanilla game. The main features include removing defense damage, restoring NPCs selling potions, the soaring insignia being able to infinitely fly again, no summon damage reduction, no damage reduction cap, remove weapon charging, and a whole lot more. Of course you can tweak these in the config settings, but just remember, Calamity nerfs these for a reason, so add this expansion at your own risk. And moving on, we have the world of Astral Infection and Astral Blight. This mod adds an item that infects the entire world with Astral Infection from the Calamity mod, along with a brand new Cosmos NPC. I'm not sure if the game will be beatable with everything being the Astral Infection, but it's a pretty solid challenge idea, considering the enemies in this biome are very difficult to deal with. Our first compatibility add-on expands on the previously mentioned Thorium Bard healer mods, making the experience more enjoyable between Thorium and Calamity. Whilst it doesn't add its own content items, the Convergence mod combines the progression and reduces the redundancy that happens between both mods. There's new recipe trees and new recipes for entirely different items. Since this can go against what the wiki says, it's recommended using the guide for new recipes or using the recipe browser mod. As for Calamity's River, this add-on for Starlight River adds compatibility with the Calamity mod. As of the current version, we have barrier related accessories. This is a defense mechanic introduced by Starlight River, and similar to defense, reduces the amount of damage a player takes. I love how it takes into account rogue accessories, which can include the Bloody Ruby and its upgrade, the Lifesteal Talisman, which stealth strikes grant temporary boosts to barrier regen. You also have stuff like the extra jelly accessory to go with the 3 that's already currently in Calamity. This one grants an aura, which provides an extra 2 barrier regen for all players inside. The next one is Post Calamitas Clone, and is specialized for summoners that use sentries. This includes a faster fire rate, shocking nearby enemies on spawn, extra placement speed, and other great stats. As with Calamity progression, also expect post-Moonlord accessories, with currently only one as of recording this video. The Amulet of the Blood God is an extremely strong defensive accessory and allow barriers to absorb all damage dealt, along with other damage mitigation bonuses. A cool little add-on, and hopefully when Starlight River expands its content, we'll also see some expansions to this mod as well. Now, Fargo Soul's DLC for Calamity is probably the largest compatibility mod we have on the list, and adds Eternity Revengeance and Eternity Death difficulties that seamlessly merges the different modes together. This is available in Calamity's difficulty toggler. Keep in mind, this also changes around AI for Fargo Soul bosses as well. But in the spirit of this video, we'll be covering strictly Eternity Mode Calamity boss reworks. The Hive Mind's core mechanics include an expansion to the little creeper minions, being able to fire additional projectiles, and provide additional shielding to the boss. Other attacks like its Cloud Rain and Vile Spit are also buffed, fitting with Fargo's crazy bullet hell style. And as for Perforators, now adds extra legs, becoming more spider-like. Movement is drastically different, and feels like a completely new challenge. The Brimstone Elemental, along with his projectiles being way more clear, has core mechanics which include an arena locking you to stay in close proximity, or else you'll slowly burn. Its Cocoon phase also received the rework, and the overall bullet hell cycles have tighter spreads. Cryogen, with its main thematic being a battle against a trapped Permafrost NPC. Attacks are themed around weapons such as the Absolute Zero, Eternal Blizzard, or Frosty Flares, a drastic change from the normal death mode Cryogen. That's all the bosses I'll cover. Make sure you subscribe if you want to stay up to date with future updates. Of course, Fargo mods, we cannot forget about the accessories, with so many Calamity themed enchantments, souls, and even forces to play around with. It's not entirely finished yet, but I gotta love the rogue class compatibility for it so far, makes it really enjoyable to play. Moving on to Ragnarok, the reason I include it in this section is because whilst yes, it does expand classes similar to the first add-on we covered, it also reworks Thorium bosses for Calamity difficulties. But before we talk about that, the Bard class, you can expect some specific helmets for Calamity's armors, ranging from early game like Victide and Aerospec, to endgame sets like Bloodflare, Silver, and Auric helmets. The Healer class gets an extra Nightfall and armor set post Poltergeist, as well as some visages for existing Calamity armor sets. As for the Thrower, this has been merged with Calamity's Rogue class to be a more cohesive experience throughout the entire progression. That's all the class specific stuff, so let's talk about Thorium bosses with Revengeance Death Mode compatibility. This includes the Grand Thunderbird, in which Revengeance mode, it moves and attacks faster and unlocks additional attacks for reaching 50% HP. It can also spawn more Thunder Zaps from above, and overall the AI is much more aggressive. In Death Mode, all its move has less downtime, and the fight will be much faster. As for Boss Rush, this basically just becomes an enraged version of the Grand Thunderbird. And as for the Queen Jellyfish, Revengeance mode makes it so Bubble Bomb no longer requires the player to be on the ground. It has slightly increased movement speed, and Bubble Bombs are more frequent and fly a little faster. As for Death Mode, the Jellyfish will move significantly faster, shoot Bubble Bombs more frequently, fly around significantly faster, and has increased defense whilst casting Whirlpool. In Boss Rush, Queen Jellyfish and her summons move and shoot much faster, and similar to the first one, basically just becomes enraged. Of course, you can expect Calamity themed sights and instrumental weapons for Bard, and if you combine Ragnarok, Convergence, and unofficial Bard and Healer add-ons all together, you got yourself an amazing Thorium Calamity playthrough. As of the 1.4.2 update, Ragnarok also introduces some new items, including the Phantasmal Edge, a healer scythe that grants 5 soul essence on direct hits, the Grasp of the Void, a healer based one which consumes mana and your own health to fire Shadow Flame explosions, the Korumbenki, a Bard Game Boy device which drops Tetris blocks from the sky. This has to be the best item in this mod. And finally, the Cosmic Injector. It consumes syringes and can either be fired at enemies for lethal amounts of DPS or even fired at allies to heal them. And now, this section is mainly etc. mods, as in they're either very niche, purely visual based, or don't fit in any other categories. Biome Spawners adds items which generate various Calamity biomes and structures, useful for fixing your Calamity world, or updating an old Calamity world with new biome changes. If you're combining other content mods with Calamities such as the Mod of Redemption or Remnants, which usually makes your world gen incompatible, this could be somewhat of an alternative solution. Biome Spawners include the Astral Monolith, Corruption Shrine, Crimson Shrine, Desert Shrine, Granite Shrine, Ice Shrine, Marble Shrine, Mushroom Shrine, Surface Shrine, Hell Lab, Ice Lab, Jungle Lab, Sunken Sea Lab, Normal Labs, Workshops, Onyx Labs, the Main Space Lab, Planetoid Spawners, Luminite Planets, the Mechanics Abandoned Shed, Brimstone Crags Generation, the Forsaken Archive, Sulphurous Sea in the Abyss, the Sunken Sea, or the Vernal Pass. And since we're talking about structures, craftable shrine items allows you to craft items that can only be found in shrines normally. As we know, these shrine items cannot normally be found by players fairly easy, so now you can craft these items. And next up, we have Decorative Potions, inspired from the original Decorative Potions mod. This version, however, adds placeable Calamity potions and alcohol tiles. Each potion, flask, and alcohol from Calamity has a decorative variant. These are purely visual, but I absolutely love it. And for Moomoo's Calamity Yo-Yo Strings pack, this mod adds purely visual strings to Calamity Yo-Yos. In the future, this will also support other mods such as Thorium. And sticking to visual mods, next are coloured Calamity relics, one for each boss and mini-boss in the Calamity mod. So here's a quick showcase of me walking past each relic. And as for Imogen's Quality of Life Calamity, this is sort of like creative mode and was especially helpful for me creating this massive video for you guys. It adds several Calamity specific toggles, which you can find in the UI next to the difficulty selector. From here, you will have multiple options, such as toggle potions, where you can choose either vanilla or Calamity specific potions, but the most useful in my opinion were the boss toggles. When testing various add-ons, certain bosses were required to be defeated in order for them to function properly, and this allows me to easily check off which bosses were slain without me having to manually butcher them. And for our last visual add-on for Calamity, it's of course the Calamity Texture Pack, with the aim to resprite Terraria's existing sprites and have the textures be more fitting with Calamity's own art style. Whilst not fully finished, you'll notice some significant differences immediately. So that was the ultimate Calamity add-ons video. Legacy 1.3 add-ons from ancient times are yet to be added, so subscribe and maybe I'll drop this video next. Goodbye.